Look at the world. Thailand, Myanmar, Pakistan, Sudan, Chile, Argentina. If you open the pages of history or look at current news, you will find countless countries where military tanks have surrounded the presidential palace, where generals have appeared on television to announce the suspension of the constitution, and where popularly elected governments have been overthrown at gunpoint. The military coup, or coup d'état, is a brutal and recurring reality of world politics. Now, think of the United States. The country possesses the most powerful, most expensive, and most technologically advanced military in world history. Its warplanes, battleships, and soldiers are deployed in every corner of the globe. The US military is so powerful that, theoretically, if it wanted to, it could overthrow any elected government in the country within hours. But the reality is, this has never happened in its history. In nearly 250 years, despite horrific internal conflicts like the Civil War, the United States has never had a successful military coup. Not even a serious conspiracy or attempted a coup has been observed. The very country that is often accused of changing governments in various nations around the world has never seen its own government's stability threatened by its own military. But why? What invisible armor or wall protects American democracy from its own army? How did the founders of the United States create a system that ensures the sword always remains subservient to the pen? And what institutional, cultural, and professional factors compel American generals to stay in the barracks and obey the orders of elected leaders? Today, we will try to find the answers to all these complex and historical questions. The deepest and most foundational reason why a military coup hasn't happened in the United States lies in the political philosophy of its founding fathers at the nation's birth. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they were all students of European history. They had seen how generals like Julius Caesar in the Roman Republic used their armies to seize power, and how military leaders like Oliver Cromwell in England had brought down elected governments. From this historical experience, they harbored a deep mistrust and fear of the idea of a large standing army. They believed that a large professional army was the greatest threat to Republican liberty, as its power and discipline could easily turn an ambitious general into a dictator. It was from this deep-seated mistrust that they created an extraordinary and far-sighted framework within the US Constitution and system of government to keep the military under the strict control of civilian authorities. For example, according to Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the commander-in-chief of the country's armed forces is the president, an elected civilian leader, not a general or an admiral. This means the military's ultimate orders come from a politician who is accountable to the people. If a general disobeys the president's order, it is a direct act of treason. The founders did not rely solely on the president to control the military. They divided the power. According to Article 1 of the Constitution, only Congress has the power to declare war, although this rule has often been bypassed in U.S. history. More importantly, Congress holds the power of the purse. Only Congress can approve the budget for the military, determine the number of troops, and allocate funds for new weaponry. According to the Constitution, no appropriation of money for the military can be for a longer term than 2 years. As a result, the military must constantly depend on the elected legislature for its very existence and supplies. Furthermore, the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which is currently much criticized regarding personal firearm ownership, had its original context in the mistrust of a standing army. The founders wanted the nation's defense to be based on a well-regulated militia, composed of ordinary citizens. Their idea was that an armed citizenry would be the ultimate safeguard against tyranny and an occupying army. Although this concept of the militia has evolved into the National Guard over time, the core philosophy behind it was to disperse military power among the people, not to centralize it. These constitutional armors, the president's civilian leadership, Congress's financial control, and the decentralization of power, have created such a strong foundation that it ensures the U.S. military will always remain an instrument of the state, not the master of it. Alongside constitutional safeguards, what makes a military coup almost impossible in the United States is the complex and intentional decentralized structure of its armed forces. In many countries, the military is a single, centralized, and homogeneous institution. But in the United States, armed power is divided into so many different branches that it is almost inconceivable for them to unite and launch a coordinated operation against the state. The U.S. Armed Forces is not a single entity. It is currently composed of 6 distinct branches: the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard. Each branch has its own command structure, its own budget, its own culture, and often, its own institutional interests. Historically, there has been a kind of healthy and sometimes unhealthy rivalry among these branches. It is nearly impossible for an Army general to get a Navy admiral or an Air Force general to cooperate in a coup. This institutional division and balance of power within the Pentagon make it extremely difficult for any single branch to control the entire military apparatus. Meanwhile, one of the most unique elements of the U.S. military structure is the National Guard. The National Guard is not a federal force. It is essentially each state's own militia. The commander of each state's National Guard is that state's governor, not the President of the United States. This means there are 50 different National Guard units in the U.S., operating under 50 different governors. Although the President can federalize the National Guard for national needs, under normal circumstances, they remain under state control. If any part of the federal army were to rebel, the governors of various states could use their National Guard to suppress that rebellion. This system creates an extraordinary decentralization of power by distributing military strength outside of Washington, D.C. and into the hands of the states. Furthermore, outside of the military, there is a vast and extensive network of armed power in the U.S. that operates under civilian control. Numerous federal agencies like the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, have their own armed units. In addition, there is each state's own police force, each county's sheriff's department, and each city's own police department. There are approximately 18,000 different law enforcement agencies in the United States. This complex and multi-layered structure ensures that there is no single center of armed power in the United. To succeed in a coup, conspirators would not only have to coordinate among the different branches of the military, but also face potential resistance from the National Guard and thousands of independent law enforcement agencies. This structural fragmentation is America's most powerful practical barrier against a coup. Perhaps even more powerful than constitutional laws and institutional structures is the invisible wall built inside the mind of every member of the U.S. military. This is the wall of their professional ethics, culture, and ideology, which teaches them to remain loyal to civilian rule. At world-class military academies like the Army's West Point, the Navy's Annapolis, or the Air Force's Colorado Springs, cadets are not only taught tactics of war, but are also thoroughly ingrained with the concept of civilian control. They are taught that a soldier's job is not to make policy, but to execute the policy set by elected civilian leaders. They are taught that the military's role is to serve the country, not to rule it. This concept of professionalism is at the very core of U.S. military culture. Every member of the U.S. military, from the common soldier to the highest-ranking general, begins their career by taking an oath. This oath is extremely important, and its every word is significant. They do not swear allegiance to a specific president, a general, or a political party. They swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The phrase, domestic enemies, in this oath is critically important. It implies that if anyone from within the country, even a high-ranking government official, tries to violate the Constitution, the military's duty is to protect the Constitution, not that person. This oath places the military in the role of an apolitical and constitutional guardian. Deep within American culture is an idea called American exceptionalism. This is the belief that the United States is different from and superior to other countries because it is founded on the principles of liberty, democracy, and the rule of law. According to this idea, a military coup in the US would not just be a political change, it would be the death of the fundamental ideal that makes America, America. This cultural belief is also deeply held among members of the military. As a result, the very idea of a coup is considered an unimaginable and almost treasonous act. Additionally, the US military, like the country, is a diverse institution. Its members come from all strata of society, all races, religions, and political ideologies. This diversity prevents the emergence of any single, homogeneous group within the military that might begin to see itself as the country's sole savior and attempt to seize power. This cultural and ideological software is the invisible force that compels the US military to stay within its constitutional boundaries. Just because the US system of civilian control is strong doesn't mean there have never been conflicts or disagreements between civilian leaders and military generals. On the contrary, American history is full of such tensions. But in every case, these conflicts were resolved within the constitutional framework, not at the barrel of a gun. During the American Civil War, the commander of the Union Army, General George B. McClellan, was a skilled organizer but a hesitant field commander. He was a vocal critic of President Abraham Lincoln's war strategy and often hesitated to obey the president's direct orders. McClellan personally believed Lincoln was an incompetent leader and even had ambitions to run against him for president. But despite all his disagreements and criticisms, he never thought of marching his army on Washington. In the end, Lincoln used his constitutional authority to fire McClellan from his post, proving that even in the midst of war, the elected civilian leader's decision was final. During the Korean War, General Douglas MacArthur was a legendary and extremely popular military commander, but he publicly disagreed with President Harry Truman's policy of limiting the war. MacArthur was in favor of expanding the war, including dropping nuclear bombs on China. He began criticizing the president's policy by writing letters to members of Congress and making statements to the media, which was a direct challenge to the commander-in-chief. Finally, in April 1951, Truman made an extremely courageous and controversial decision. He fired America's most popular general from his post. Truman said, "I fired him because he wouldn't respect the authority of the president. I didn't fire him because he was a dumb son of a bitch, although he was, but that's not against the law for generals. If it was, half to three-quarters of them would be in jail." This event was the most powerful and unequivocal application of the principle of civilian control in US history. It proved that no general, no matter how popular or heroic, is above the law. There are many such incidents in recent history as well. During the Vietnam War, there were disagreements between the Johnson administration and the Pentagon. During the war in Afghanistan, General Stanley McChrystal was forced to resign after criticizing Obama administration officials in a Rolling Stone magazine article. More recently, during the final days of Donald Trump's first presidential term, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, reportedly questioned the constitutional legality of some of the president's decisions and took steps to tighten control over nuclear weapons. These incidents show that civil-military relations are not always smooth, but these tensions have always been resolved through political and constitutional processes, not through a coup. The historical and structural safeguards against a military coup in the United States are undoubtedly strong, but 21st century modern America is facing some new challenges that have raised new questions about the durability of these safeguards. American society and politics are currently suffering from unprecedented polarization. The division between Democrats and Republicans is no longer limited to policy differences. It has turned into a deep cultural and ideological conflict. This intense polarization is affecting the military, just as it is affecting other institutions. Members of the military are also human, and they have their own political beliefs. When the country's political leaders label each other as enemies and cast doubt on democratic processes, it becomes increasingly difficult for the military to remain apolitical. In recent years, the trust of the American people and political leaders in the country's democratic institutions, such as the election system, the judiciary, and the media, has severely eroded. This erosion of trust creates a dangerous vacuum. When people and leaders do not trust democratic institutions, they may be tempted to look for alternative, undemocratic solutions, including military intervention. Again, some political leaders have tried to use the military for their political interests, which is a dangerous trend. Using the military in political rallies or trying to drag generals into political debates harms the apolitical character of the military. When the military becomes closely associated with one particular political party, it becomes difficult for them to serve under another party, which destroys the delicate balance of civil-military relations. Meanwhile, the Pentagon itself has acknowledged that the infiltration of white supremacist and other extremist groups within the military is a growing problem. These groups are not loyal to the U.S. Constitution, but to a specific racist or authoritarian ideology. Although their numbers are still very small, their presence is a serious threat to the unity and discipline of the military. The attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, was a direct assault on American democracy. Among the participants in this event were a significant number of military veterans and even some active duty members. Although this was not a military coup and the military leadership quickly condemned the event, it showed how deeply the country's political divisions have penetrated and that some members of the military can also be influenced by these extremist ideas. Of course, these challenges do not indicate that a military coup is imminent in the United States, but they do suggest that the historical and cultural foundations that have protected American democracy are no longer as impregnable as they once were.